exactly where we are now. So, in his languages, הנה כל מאמינים שהוא לבדו הוא ויחיד ומיוחד, כמו שהיה הוא לבדו קודם שנברא העולם. כן, הוא גם עתה לפניו, אחר שנברא העולם הוא לבדו הוא. הנה כל מאמינים. It's just a beautiful way to start. He's liturgical in his writing.
That's exactly the Chita said yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Where we holding you?
Sure, we're by Gimel.
Let's start from Gimel.
And what we said was that Inyan Zeh Madriga Zeh, everything we talked about now, about Kriyas Shema, the greatness of it. להגביר יסוד האש האלוקי שבנפשו, להלהיב ליבו לא דופקה בו, אין זו עבודה טומאה ותמידית. So we said, the Kriyas Shema can't be done all the time. You can't be in a state of Kriyas Shema the whole time. The whole 24 hours of every day. Why? Because like we said, you have to cover your eyes. The world was not created to live in the crown, in the toe. It's created to live down here. Lashevet Yetzirah. Hashem created the world to be inhabited. So he doesn't want reality ignored. And the reality that seems to be, again, and which doesn't understand anything better than that it's separate from godliness. That's why after the sin of the spies, the libations are a rectification for the sin of the spies. And he says that when you come into Eretz Yisrael, even now, when you're still in the desert, but certainly there, actually I don't know if libations were brought in the desert, in the wilderness. Maybe they weren't, I don't know. But they're the rectification. Why? Because they're the vessels, as he's now going to say. In the same way that Kriyas Shema,
why the rectification of the Meraglim?
Because the sin of the Meraglim was they wanted to stay in the toe, in the wilderness. The wilderness represents the crown. And that's what they meant in Brachos, Yudalid, when they said, sorry, here it's Kiddushin Lamed Hey, he says. The whole thing was from Kiddushin. I thought it was the same Gemara as what Rabbi Isaac quotes. That he who reads Kriyas Shema without putting tefillin on, it's as if he brought a korban without bringing the libations. V'inyan tefillin. Why the tefillin as an example? Because tefillin are a general representative for the category of practical mitzvahs. Things that you actually do.
It says that tzedakah is a general mitzvah.
It's called a mitzvah in Yerushalmi again, but it's not. Nowhere does it say that huksha kol haTorah kula litefillin.
Where does it say that?
In Kiddushin. Huksha kol haTorah kula litefillin. 219. Kiddushin Lamed Hey. So, the entire Torah, what does it mean? Every time the sages say something, you have to understand what they're saying, because they say things in a very curt and all-encompassing, because it's so short. Because that's the way people remember. When you say, like, but the whole context, you have to learn from somebody. So the context when it says that all the Torah was likened to tefillin is not that tefillin is the most important mitzvah in the Torah. It's not what they came to say. What they came to say is that the entire Torah goes through a transformation in tefillin. Tefillin represent a transformation of Torah from something that's only theoretical, abstract, into something practical. Why? שבתפילין מלובשים מוחין עליונים שבעשר ספירות עליונות בתמונות אותיות גשמיות. Because we take, as it were, the mindset of Torah and we write it down. That's what we wear in the tefillin. So it could be you can call it a conduit, but what we're really talking about is a vessel. It becomes a vessel for everything that you learned, that you understood from Torah, now becomes something concrete. והוא כי צריך האדם להשפיל עצמו ולומר די לעבד להיות כרבו. ולעשות מכון לשבטו להיות לו בדירה בתחתונים. Because why is all this? Why do we need practical mitzvot? Why can't we just make do with learning all day and that will change reality? Really, yesterday I think I exaggerated a little. He's not talking against somebody who learns in the morning and then in the evening he writes a book and he tries to influence people. Because there's a person who's actually getting out there. He's doing something. Yeah, it's not a mitzvah like tefillin maybe, but he's taking the Torah and he's trying to apply it. He's trying to reach the world. Yesterday I said sort of that don't believe that all of reality will suddenly become aware of godliness. What I should have said is that if you sit in a room and you close the door, like in a yeshiva, you sit in a yeshiva and in a base medrash and you learn all day, don't expect it that it will change the world so that when you emerge in the evening, you'll come outside and what will you hear? Everybody will say, I'm so happy to be here in this godly world. and all of reality will act differently. It doesn't work that way. Why? Because there's a barrier. The barrier is that the Torah doesn't become concrete until you do something, until you build a vessel. You have to build a vessel. To say it another way, this is the famous, one might say, dispute between Maimonides and Chassidus. In many things, Maimonides agrees with Chassidus, and many things, and there's one major point where Chassidus doesn't agree. What's that major point? By the Rambam, by Maimonides, the ultimate rectification of man comes through knowledge, by sitting and learning. He says that all that's left of the person after he passes away is his da'at.
The Rambam himself was asuk
But he had to. He forced him. It was the only way they'd let him live. Right? Because the Sultan in Egypt found out that he was a good physician. And he forced him.
He learned to be a physician before.
He learned. He wasn't a physician. You understand? He went to learn because his understanding was that knowledge is, and consciousness is what you're here for. That's the ultimate end. Now, to say that the Rambam didn't care for mitzvahs would be completely wrong, because of course he did. But in the end, he felt that the epitome of man was his knowledge, was his state of mind. And his actions were secondary. He doesn't think they're not important. They're very important. In fact, you might say that without actions, in the end, his life is going to be just one, like a wave crashing on the seashore. Nothing left of it. But really, his essence, man's essence, is to think. And that's how he explains it in his halachic work. In Torah, he says that what's left from man in the end is his da'at. But the Baal Shem Tov didn't agree with this. The Baal Shem Tov said, if that's true, when that's true, if that were true, then the whole outlook would indeed be that the Litvaks are right. But the most important thing is to sit in Kollel and learn. But the Hasidic outlook wasn't this way. Again, because there's the Keter, and to truly understand the crown, you have to understand how the crown influences in reality. The crown is not the mind, it's something else. What is the crown? The crown wants to affect below through kingdom. It's called the succession of crowns until you get to kingdom. So by Chassidus, the most important thing in the end is the action. That's what you said yesterday. Ma'aseh v'ikra. Ma'aseh can be many things. Ma'aseh can be even that you learn during the day, and then at night you write a book, and you try to distribute the book, and you walk around with copies and hand it out to whoever wants a copy, and so on and so forth. It could be. I don't know. I'm just saying in the derech of shal. It could be that it's this way. But certainly the mitzvahs themselves. And certainly the mitzvahs themselves, they're the most important thing in the end. כי הוגשה כל התורה לתפילין, כמו שבתפילין Why? כי צריך אדם להשפיל עצמו, לומר די לה ולהיות קרבו. Because we need to mimic God. It's enough for us as God's servants to do what He did. What did He do? You see that He created a physical world.
Why is that mashpila?
Because you think that Rabbi Isaac writes it even better. He says something that the Alter Rebbe talked about many times. We've seen it. He just brings it here. Here he didn't bring it. That La Bocha de Malka Ishtai B'mila de Idiote. That it's not the way of a king to deal or to get involved in minute matters. Where did God get involved in minute matters? When He created the world. So what does He want? So you see that He lowered Himself. He brought Himself down. Why? Because He has a craving, liot lo dira b'tachtonim, that He wants to have a dwelling here below. So it's enough for the servant, meaning us, to do what the master does. So if He is willing to come down into this world, so all the more so that we should.
Why does it say die? Why does it say kalvachom?
Sorry? Die?
Why?
It's enough.
Why does it say kalvachom?
It's not a kal v'chomer. It's more like,
Or kamori?
yeah, that's what it means. Die is like more. והוא כי צריך האדם, sorry, לעשות מכון נשיתו, להיות עוד דירה בתחתונים. דהיינו במקרא, משנה ותלמוד הלכות ואגדות, שהם מדברים עניינים תחתונים גשמיים, והם כלים מכלים שונים, והם מלכות, שהוא אור אין סוף ברוך הוא המלובש, והם רב כי יד המלך, שהוא עניין היד הגדולה. And how does this come down? That it comes down through the person learning Torah that's practical. Even when he's learning Agada, and you would think that Agada is something impractical, because it's not talking about an actual reality that happens. It's not talking about an actual. It could be talking about, it's a simile, it's a metaphor, it's an allegory, whatever it is. Still, you should learn it.
So the halachas is
What?
so also the halachas are in a certain sense.
Some of the halachas are, why?
Reuven says like this, and Shimon says like that, and the Shul does this, and the other way is all things that this would never happen.
Good, and if it never happens.
He's standing what the Shul wants.
Yeah, but that's rare. I think that's rare. Still, even those, you need to think about how do they become applicable. They still deal with the physical world. They still deal with the world as we see it.
Yeah, you need to learn those before you can think about it.
Uh-huh. So they're called different vessels. And the wine inside, that's why the Rebbe always calls it the Yeina shel Torah, the wine of the Torah. What's the wine of the Torah? It's the Pnimius. It's the light inside, the infinite light inside. It should be infinite, you're right. But in the end, you have to bring it down into practical terms. And if you don't bring it down to practical terms, so you're not doing what Hashem did. Hashem took the Torah and He built the world. And He was interested in building a world. Rabbi Isaac apparently is a little bit different in this case. He goes further. But we're not learning Rabbi Isaac now, so... כמו שכתוב, וירא ישראל את היד הגדולה אשר עשה השם במצרים. פירוש הגדולה היא התפשטות אשר נתפשטה עד אין קץ ותכלית, והיא ענוותנותו. So he says, what does it mean, the great hand, that the Jewish people saw at the Red Sea, and they saw what God had done in Mitzrayim? So the great hand, the Gdolah, is an infinite expansion. אשר עשה שם במצרים, פירוש כי פעל ועשה בחינת שם הווה אפילו בארץ מצרים. So he made the essence of Havaya appear even in Egypt. And what's Egypt? Egypt is the place of Tumah. So it's called the Yetzias Mitzrayim. Who went out in Mitzrayim? Who was willing to come down into even Egypt and reveal himself there? Hashem. Because it's Yetziat Mitzrayim, lo Yetziat mi Mitzrayim. Hashem went out that night in Egypt. So everything Hashem had done in Egypt is what He does in the world. That He's willing to come down, the infinite is willing to come down into the finite. Like all the halachas, then in the end they're talking about physical objects. ופירוש היד הגדולה יש לומר, על דרך מה שכתוב בהידרא זוטא, שהחוכמה מלבשת לבחינת חסד הילה. In the Zorah, there are a few sections that are considered the quintessential sections. They're also the earliest. And they were most probably, the two Idrot, were most probably dictated by Rashbi himself. Out of all the Zohar has a lot of teachings. It's very big. But there's two sections, the day that he thought he would die and the day that he actually passed away. He revealed the Partsufim. He revealed the personas. So the Idra Zuta was the day that he died. It's in Parashas Ha'azinu. Idra Ta'azinu it's called. And that, apparently Rashbi said it on Lag BaOmer, the day that he passed away. So the Idra, it's called the Idra Zuta because it's a small assembly. And Idra is an assembly. So we won't get into it because it's very Kabbalistic. ואפילו בעסקים ומשא ומתן, אם הוא נושא ונותן באמונה, הרי עולם זה חסד ייבנה. And even when we're talking about his business dealings, he's also doing it as a mitzvah. כי הוא נושא ונותן באמונה, because he's trustworthy. עולם זה חסד ייבנה, because this world has to be built through loving kindness. Loving kindness is a type of acting properly towards other people.
When you mention myself, it's much more.
Second he will. וגם אחר כך ייתן צדקה מיגו, שהוא ממידת החסד. And even more so when he gives tzedakah. That's certainly chesed. That's certainly loving kindness. והוא ענף החוכמה, כמו שאומרים, מוריד אותנו וחכה לחיים בחסד. The reason he brings this here is because he wants to say that these are all our actions that come from the chesed of Atik. Rav chesed. Anyway, it's technical, but not so important here. So when he gives tzedakah to a poor person, he's giving him life. So why do this? Why not? Why waste your time? Why not just sit in a study hall all day? What? His own, of course, his own also. Could be both. So all this is that the wisdom can't just remain theoretical. It has to be something that gives life.
Not just love talking.
רק אם ישים אליו ליבו רוחו ונשמתו אליו, וזה says in איוב, בקריאת שמע, אזי רוח היית רוח והמשיך רוח להיות שורא השם גם בתורה ומצוות מעשיות. So, in the end, there has to be not just Torah, but there have to be practical mitzvos. והנה עניין עבודה זו להמשיך את דירתו יתברך בתחתונים. להיות אין עוד מלבדו, היא למעלה מים מדרגת התלהבות הנקראת בשם גדפין לבד. לפי שעל כל פנים הוא הוכח להיות שיצייר איזה יש בדבר בפני עצמו בחינת לב ונפש שמתלהב. גדפין are the wings. So he says, this type of work where you're bringing godliness down into reality, is much greater than any kind of emotional service that a person does. Ein od milvado means that without him there is nothing, but with him there is. Okay? It's saying that the real existence of reality, the real legitimacy, not legitimacy, the real essence of everything, the purpose of everything, is to be cognizant of God. Cognizant in what way? Not, like we said, might not understand it from inside, but they see the world being run a certain way. Okay? Meaning, like we said yesterday about the tefillin, that the nations will see the tefillin on you, and then they'll fear you. Why? Because just the Torah by itself, the fact that these Jews have some knowledge, it doesn't drive the message home. You don't get it. Because they have no natural connection to Hashem. It has to come from something that they see. So in the end, it has to be something practical. It has to be something that you can see, something you can touch. So this type of service is higher than any other kind of service. Even of just emotions, he says. Why? Because even with emotions, let's say a person says, I want to love and fear God. So there has to be something that loves and fears him. There has to be a yesh, there has to be something. You can't talk about emotions without there being something with the emotions. Mm-hmm. So there has to be with God something. Again, there has to be a world. But when you say just einod, right, there's two psukim. One says, that's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. But when Rachav, which is the Haftarah, what does she say?
The wife of Joshua.
Eventually. But what does she say when the spies come to her?
I don't know that at all.
Hashem wa Elokim einod. She only says, we know that God, Havaya is God. There is nothing else. Why did she say nothing else? Why didn't she say like Moshe Rabbeinu, there's nothing but him? She says the big difference is that when you say Ein Od, that means there is nothing. There really is nothing. Meaning the highest level that she could come to was to truly believe in God, negate reality. Negate reality. Reality is a farce. I don't want to hear about it.
So it's not reality.
Right? It's fake.
It's seeming reality.
Okay? And I scorn it. I don't want it. It says in general that that's the highest level that a non-Jew comes to. And that's why, for instance, in the East, they think that God is nothingness. And that all of reality is an illusion. They can't accept the fact, it's not a fact, they can't accept the belief that beyond the nothingness there's something again. That they can't accept. That God is not just nothingness, and the world is not just a figment of your imagination. It's not an illusion. They can't attribute reality to, that it's real, to reality. Because that's how they understand godliness. To really be godly means to negate reality. And you see it all the time. It's like, it's not just in the East, it's everywhere. They can't sanctify life. Life, regular life. That a person gets married. Okay? If you want to be holy in Christianity, what do you have to do?
Don't get
You
married.
have to celibate.
Well, you have to pretend to be single.
Said it, whatever. But why? Because you can't accept it. That Hashem wants this world. It's impossible to accept it. But that's exactly the state that the spies were in. That they were in the wilderness, and they thought the same thing. That it's that this level, he's right. They're right. That this level of conceiving of the world can't get the Canaanites out of Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because the Canaanites are not open to this understanding that things should be sanctified. They're not open to it. What are they open to? Yeshus, reality. They don't want to hear about anything else. The other extreme is like Rachav, who says there is nothing here. We're all in an illusion. And these are the two extremes. Those are the only two options. Either the world is real and God is an illusion, or God is real and the world is an illusion. Those are the only two options. You can't have both. It doesn't work.
If you believe in Hashem, and Hashem created the world, then from that point of view, the world is real. Because Hashem created it, and Hashem is real. The world is part of Hashem.
Why would you believe that? I mean, if you believe that. You look at what happens today in...
physical world. I'm not talking about all the nonsense that takes place with all these stupid people who twist and cheat and lie.
Why would the physical world be real? If you're telling me that God is everything, again, logically, if you're telling me that God is everything, so what do I see here? What is this?
Well, it should be.
It's an illusion. But it can't be. How can there be anything outside of God?
Because it's part of Hashem.
Then it doesn't exist.
Well, Hashem exists.
And I'm saying there's only Hashem then. But this doesn't exist. This is all an illusion. If God is infinite, there's nothing outside of Him. So how is this table something outside of Him? Doesn't make any sense. In the end, what we say is that the Chiddush of Chassidus is the paradox. The paradoxical state of everything. Everything is in a state of paradox. Because Hashem is a paradox. What does it mean? What does paradox really mean? He's beyond your thought. He's not beyond your thought in the sense that He knows how much 1 plus, I don't know, a billion is.
No, He's infinite and not infinite.
He has logic that's beyond your logic. And in your logic, to say two statements like Hashem exists and the world exists, that's a paradox. So the Goyim follow logic. But Hashem is beyond your logic. If He's beyond your logic, so for Him it's not a paradox. It's not a paradox. They both exist. He is everything, and the world is the world. So that's why we say in Chassidus, Hashem is the world, and the world is Hashem. Or rather, Hashem is everything, and everything is Hashem.
So then the world is real.
What? And Hashem is real. And it's paradoxical, and you're right. So that state they couldn't understand. They couldn't see being able to live in that state. Meaning, in the wilderness they were living that everything is God. And in Eretz Yisrael they saw that they would be living that everything is just everything. And there's no godliness in
They
it.
didn't have Chassidus.
That was the issue. That was the issue. Anyway, continuing. ורצון השם שווה למטה כמו למעלה. 21. והנה על זה נאמר סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. והנה בחינה זו נקראת ארץ כנען מלשון הכנעה והשפלה, שהנופל ומשפיל את עצמו למטה. מבחינה זו כתיב רגלי יולדות מוות, כי מאחר שהוא מקושר למטה בעניינים גשמיים, אפשר לו ליפול חס ושלום ותאוות גשמיות. And that's what it means that the land of Canaan was called the land of Canaan, because we said that means that it was submissive. What was it submissive to? It was susceptible to a willingness to come into reality. And but that's where the danger is. That's where the danger is, because if you go too much into reality, you may end up saying there's no Hashem. But on the contrary, meaning in a certain sense, the land of Canaan is both a positive title, that you say that this land is ready to submit to the divine will, but it also means that here it's not such a positive title, that it's also willing to really be a reality. It's willing to be real. Real in the sense that it has actual existence. And in other places, well, the existence is not so harsh. It's not so strong. I think that that's something most people will agree with. That of all the lands in the world, here there's something harsher. It's not, reality here is it's at a different level. It's much more powerful. And everywhere else, you're sort of, you feel that it's easy to be frum in a certain sense. It's easy to believe in God. And here it's a tough job.
You want to run away.
I never run away. I might want to do something better, but I don't want to run away. Because you're so connected to reality, you might fall into negative cravings. So you have to get rid of that sentiment when you come into the land of Israel. That's what it means to transform it from the land of Canaan to the land of Israel. You have to get rid of that sentiment that says that reality is so harsh, so strong, that don't talk to me about godliness. Don't talk to me about it at all. That's basically what you hear. The only other place I think in the world where it's a sin for anyone in the government or anyone who has an official position to say something religious is here in China. I think you can't write Basad on a official letter, and if you do, I don't know if you did or you didn't when you were in the Ministry of Health. Okay, but if the Yoetz HaMishpati of Misad HaBriut would see this, so you would be reprimanded, you'd be forced to stop. Because there's already a hora'ah like that from the Yoetz HaMishpati of the Memshalah from the time of Meni Mazuz or whoever it was then.
Who was with a kippah?
Meni Mazuz, I don't think he had a kippah when he was in office. It was just, but it doesn't matter anyway. It doesn't matter. They're all the same. Their kippah is for shul. Again, it's like there's Hashem and there's the world. You can't mix the two. Doesn't work that way.
You're not allowed to write the book, Hashem?
So there was a whole thing that Efi Eitan was then in the was at his highest level in the army then, which is the highest level that a frum Jew with a beard who actually learned and cared reached, which is ridiculous, right? He's a brigadier general.
What was it? What was his technique?
I don't know. They made him some head of an aguda, of a regiment. It's ridiculous because 50% of the officers are frum.
70%.
I don't know, maybe it's higher now. Used to be when I was in officers training, it was 50%. And in 73 years, there's been two from generals. Gad Navon, I don't know if you remember him. Remember him? He was the chief rabbi of the army. And they gave him an aluf. They gave him a general for show. Because he didn't matter anything. And the other one was this guy Stern, whatever his name was. You know what he is? He's a conservative Jew, hardly.
The one from the Yeshatid?
Yeah.
He's going to be head of the Jewish Agency.
Oh, there you go. Everything is moving in the way of the conservative and reform now, again. And he wrote, Efi Eitam wrote on his letterheads, Basad. So somebody in the army didn't like it, and they sent it to review legally, and they forced him to take it down. And he says, what does it mean? It means I want air support. B'siyata d'ishmaya. With the help of heaven. So it's forbidden. You're not allowed to on an official document, as far as I know. Anyway, the point is, you can't combine the two. It doesn't work. You want to be religious, be in shul. Do whatever you want in the shul. Don't bother us. Don't bring it outside. We're not interested in it outside because reality is reality. Don't mix it.
I have a story for you from that.
Yeah. So Hashem says you have to get rid of this evil. Again, the evil here is the Canaanite insistence that there is no God. There's only reality. It says again, that part is negative. But the fact that it takes reality seriously, that part is good. And even here, I don't want to throw everything out. I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's a negative side to it, but there's a positive side to it. The positive side is that they take reality seriously. And reality is tough, it's hard, it's not easily won over, all these things are true. But the fact that they don't want to involve godliness in it, that has to be eradicated. And so he says that for that I'll send the wasp. Tzirah literally means wasp. But of course, we're not talking about a physical wasp. I once wanted to write about what in the world this might be, this tzirah, hornet, whatever it is. Well, what kind of animal was this that God said he'd send it? So now he's going to give a spiritual understanding of it. Okay? What is this wasp that Hashem is going to send to eradicate the Canaanites? Even those that are hidden from you. Again, he's here talking about the spiritual, he's sublimating it. He's saying, I'm talking about the spiritual residue left over from the Canaanites in you, in every Jew, where you take the reality so seriously that you don't want to introduce God into it. So it did two things. The sages say, this hornet, or wasp, what it did was, it blinded their eyes from above, and it castrated them from below. It's a very powerful image. Obviously, it's not a literal image. What are they talking about? What it means. The sages said, we talked about this actually in last week, that from the sweat of the angels comes out the fiery river, which is on top of the heads of the wicked in Gehenna. What does that mean? Like we said, zayah is the excrement. It's what's left over. You could say that here he says it's chema, it's even anger. It says in Jeremiah that the tempest of Hashem is like anger that comes out. So what we mean by something that comes out is that it represents anger. And that's their excrement. And that's what again, because it's like when a person, what does it mean? Why do you get angry at the evil inclination? What's good about getting angry about it? Because getting angry about it is a way of removing it. You have to push it away from you. כי בכל עולם, בעולם יש בחינת טוב ורע, ואין רוצה לומר רע ממש, חס ושלום, אלא רע מלשון כעס וחמה, ועניין חסד גבורה שבכל העולמות. Because every reality, every world has good and evil in it. And we don't want to say evil, actual evil, the person did something evil. Even just getting angry. It's just the anger itself, that's already something negative. So you have to get it out. And that's what's called the loving kindness and the might in each world. This is exactly what we read last week. וכן העניין באדם שהוא עולם קטן, יש בו גם כן בחינות האלה, וצריך לעורר גבורות שבו על עצמו. דהיינו על הרע שבו, שהוא מסיתרא דסמך מם ונוקבה, שהם הם הרשעים, כמו שכתוב, על ראש רשעים יחול. And the person is like a small world, so even inside me there's good and evil. I didn't know, now I know. And I have to get rid of the evil. How do I get rid of it? By getting angry at it. I have to push it out. That's how you push it out. That's what the sages say, that a person should always agitate the evil inclination with the good inclination. Get angry at it. Why forever? Why always? Because don't think that you can ever really get rid of it. You always have some more. There's always some left. Every person, regardless of what level he's at, has good and evil inside. רע לשמיים ורע לבריות, והרוגז והכעס ישפוך על הרע שבו, שיקצוף מאוד בחירי אפו, למה הוא כך? So the evil inside of me, what's it for? So what do I need it? So this is an amazing thing. That it's pagabo kayotzebo. He doesn't say these words, but that's what he means. That you need like to hurt like. So if the evil itself is like anger and hostility and all these things, you need to use anger and hostility to get rid of it.
That's the theory of homeopathic.
Right, homeopathic medicine. Pagabu kayotzebo. Or, as they say, that the wood used for the axe was taken from the tree that you cut down. Okay? So you have to use the same power that it has in order to... והתעוררות בחינת וגבורה הנ"ל ומזעתן של חיות. Okay, now you get into the whole thing now, which is very interesting, but I don't think we have time for it. I wanted to finish. So let's go to Dalet.
We don't have knowledge.
ובזה יובן עניין המרגלים. And through this we'll understand the issue with the spies. שלא רצו להיכנס לארץ כנען. שעניין ההשפלה למטה מצוות מעשיות. They didn't want to come into the land of Canaan, which means taking reality seriously and having to do practical mitzvot. שהם עניינים הגשמיים באמונת ייחודו בתחתונים. And that's what it means to bring Hashem down into the lower worlds. כי אמרו, ארץ אוכלת יושביה, היא פירוש יושביה, אין תופסים מקום לעצמם כלל, מבטלים עצמם ייחודו יתברך שבתחתונים להיות אין עוד, כי היו דור דעה ושורש נשמתם למעלה למעלה. They said, if we come into this land, what will happen to us? It will be either, they were like in Rachav's mindset. It's either or. It's either all Gashmius or it's all spiritual. He said, if we come in there, it's going to eat us. What are we going to become? We will dwell in the land. We will become exactly like the Canaanites. You think that we'll vanquish the Canaanites? Big deal. We'll become the Canaanites. What did Hashem achieve by that? Nothing. Because we'll take their place. We'll be exactly like they are. Which, by the way, is not so far from the truth. But it was still wrong. It still wasn't 100% true. Because as much as Jewish people in the end learned from the ways of the Canaanites, still they did mitzvahs. Still they built a temple, they did many things. וגם החיתי והיבוסי והאמורי יושב בהר, שהם הם השבעה אומות עובדי כוכבים שבאמת היו דרים בה בעת ההיא ושורשם משם במידות עולם התוהו. והם שורש השם במידות רעות אשר צריך להיזהר מאוד שלא ייפול בעמידות ההם חס ושלום, כי רגלי יורדות מה ומו שכתוב שבעה גויים גדולים ועצומים. And the 7 nations of the Canaanites are living in there. And what do they represent? The 7 emotional attributes of the negative inside each person. And that's what we will adopt. We'll become just like that. But באמת, אמר ועצומים ממכה, גדולים ועצומים ממכה. Meaning, Hashem said, these 7 nations are greater than you, not greater than me. ממכה דווקא, פירוש, שאתה מגדלם. They become great because of you. You are the one who makes the evil take hold inside yourself. ואתם לימדתם אותם עליכם אלופים לראש, כי מה שנחשבו לאלופים דבר גדול הוא מחמתכם, שאתם מחשיבים אותם ליש וגדול והוא ביניכם. And what gives them, what feeds their power? The fact that you give them too much credence. You give them too much rapport. You hold from them too much. Don't hold from it so much. Don't think that reality is that impervious. Don't think that it can't be changed. It can. אבל באמת צריך להקטין אותם בעיניו. And that's exactly what they said, that we were in our own eyes like ants relative to them. And this becomes, this section becomes one of the seminal sections of Avodas HaNefesh in Eretz Yisrael, according to Rabbi Isaac. This becomes how you interpret all of the Arizal's Kabbalah into the work of the psyche, the psychology of living in the land of Israel. What does it mean not to look, not to see reality as overpowering? How do you come to that? How do you come to that state? How can you come to a place where oinit pilus from reality, but on the other hand, you don't fall to the other extreme, which is reality is an illusion. I don't care. There's a very thin line between the two. Between giving it too much credence and the opposite, which is saying it's all an illusion. That becomes the center of everything that needs to be discussed in terms of Eretz Yisrael, and it comes from this mimer. So I think we'll end here, right? And
So Efi Eitan came to the house of Rabbi Mordechai Eliyahu to be Menachem
today's is
Ovid,
your side.
to be Menachem Ovid. This is your side.
Israel says on Shabbos, cafe.
Okay.
But
This is the
everybody went today.
This is a story from Yochanan Didis.
Okay.
So he said to him, I'm going to tell you a great miracle that happened.
Mm-hmm.
So he was up north, and he was on the border of Lebanon, and he sent a group of 23 soldiers into Lebanon, by foot. And they had to do a certain misima. So they had a guide, and they were walking along, they didn't have ways there. So they came to a certain point, and suddenly the guide grabs his head and said, oh no, we've fallen into a trap. He says, you heard of landmines? He said the Hezbollah had something much more sophisticated than landmines. They had great big boulders. They weren't really boulders, they were paper mache filled with explosives, and trees filled with explosives. And it was all around the big circle. And then they would hook up the whole circle with a laser beam. And then as soon as somebody broke the laser beam, the whole thing just exploded. He said, we've fallen into it, we found it out, and we stuck. Anybody moves their finger, and we're just going to be blood smithereens. So the Mempei phoned up Efi Eitan in horror and desperation and said, what are we going to do? Right? We can't move, we can't breathe. Right? This is the end. 23 soldiers. So Efi Eitan says, I phoned up Mordechai Eliyahu, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was already up and about in a certain morning, and I told him what's going on. So I said to him, Kvod Harav HaGadol, please, down for us, that somewhere or other we'll get these 23 soldiers out. So Mordechai Eliyahu said, okay, give me a minute or two. And he heard him davening, and then he came back on the phone and he said very quietly and very calmly, okay, I'm holding on.
Told them to leave.
I'm holding on, and just get them out of there as quickly as possible, and I'll hold on for as long as I can. So he said to them, get out of there as fast as you can. In the meantime, they're listening in to the
Hezbollah.
Cheder Milchama of the Hezbollah. They were tuned in. And they hear this guy screaming, turn on the laser, turn on the laser. And the guy's going, I'm pressing, it's not happening. He says, turn on the laser, I'll string you up, I'll kill you, I'll chop you to pieces, you're an enemy spy, you're a Zionist. Press that. Nothing happened. And these 23 guys are running like crazy. And when the last one got out, they suddenly got the laser going.
Yeah, they blew up.
Exploded, but nothing happened to any of the guys. I'd like to know who he was holding onto, but it doesn't say that.
He's holding on to the laser, to the button.
He was. It's a very interesting story. I'd like to know exactly, the...
Call him up. Ask him.
Who?
Efi Eitan. You can call him up and ask him. It's very nice.
He was going to...